I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Micah, why are you going live in the middle of the day Eastern time right now? Because we haven't seen one of these conversations on Thursday in a long time. And you know what? You would be right because I've been doing things. Last week I was in Denver working with business coaching clients of mine and helping them to focus, re-strategize, and reframe their business so that they can grow and scale to millions of more dollars than they're doing right now. And so I had on site. So I had to fly out there and I had to fly back all in 24 hours. I did over 3,800 miles. It was wild and I'm just now recovered. So it took a bit to do that. Today I have an interesting guest, a very special guest, John Brumley. He is a master of charitable giving, and he talks about the future of charitable giving. We're going to have an interesting conversation about how you can unleash the future of charitable giving, how you can, we're just going to talk about the misconceptions of charitable giving, and how you can actually make a lasting difference with what you give. So if you're watching this and you actually don't give anything, then you might be motivated to by the end of our conversation, but I'm excited for it. So stick right here for 30 seconds, and then I'll be back with John Brumley. You are now in the room with me and John Brumley. Welcome to the Common Sense Show. Again, John, welcome to the Common Sense Show. And you've had quite the career, generally speaking. We had a chance to talk about your amazing 40 under 40 and how I have never accomplished anything impactful enough to even be under something. Hopefully they have a 100 under 100 award at some point in the future, and I will earn my way. But you've already done that. Can you introduce yourself to the audience and those watching and let us know just a little bit about you and what you're up to right now?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. You've got my vote for 100 under 100. You're still looking great.
Awesome.
My name's John, and I describe myself as a charity banker. What that means, generally speaking, is I work for whoever's giving the money away, and I'm not there to sell them on a cause. That's up to them. What change are they trying to create in the world? That's what I'm here to help them think through and navigate and then carry out. And so that's my sort of subject matter expertise. But I'm in Canada, which is that state north to you guys. And there wasn't sort of a platform to help people carry out their giving that was built, in my opinion, exclusively for donors. And so I've also created that platform, and it's called Charitable Impact.
Why does charity have to be revolutionized? Why isn't a check that's handed to someone good enough?
Well, if you actually hand the check to someone, I'd say it is good enough. Although I've got kids and I don't think they know what a check is. So, the world's just sort of changing at that level, and giving, like everything else in the world, has to keep up. I think the real reason it has to be revolutionized is because, generally speaking, in Canada and in the United States, there's a decline in participation. So like, what I don't think is there's not a decline in generosity, but there is a decline in people taking action, particularly in the charitable giving sphere. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why I think that is, and we can get into that if you want to. But I think the real reason it has to be revolutionized is because we need more people to participate. We need more people to reconnect to that. It's actually kind of cool and fun to be involved with giving.
Yeah, let's get into that. Why, in your opinion, do you think there's a decline in giving generally right now? Is it as simple as the cost of living has increased substantially, or do you think that there is maybe educational or other reasons why people are just giving less. Because there are certain groups. There's always been certain demographics. If I can add to my very long-winded question, there's always been certain demographics fundamentally that have, statistically have given more. People who have faith tend to give more to charity, things like that. But why the decline?
Well, why do you think people of faith give more to charity? It's true, they do.
I would say that a tenet of most religions specifically is the thought of giving and doing for people who can't do for themselves, in kind of concert with whatever, a deity or specific, uh, for our footstep follower, whether it's Jesus or someone else that they're following. They believe that that part of their life and their success is directly tied to giving. I mean, if you're a Christian, then you know that in the Bible Jesus talks about that there's more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. And so if a person is a practicing, that's something that they would theoretically be aligned with. That model of life, not looking for something else, not necessarily looking for a tax deduction, even though those things are nice, but primarily doing it because you have it and you can and you should.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, I'd say that back to you by saying like, so first of all, like, people that practice, and you actually use that word too. You did great, man. People that practice religion
Pass the test.
You so far. People who practice religion, like in Canada, they give 4x more what people who don't, give, and so the question becomes why. And I think the answer can be summarized as like the word you used earlier, education. Like they're taught about giving, right? It's in the theology. The people who practice the religion as a result do it. And so if you're growing up you're part of that community, you're seeing it happen around you, right? Educators call that modeling. The giving is being modeled for you. And ultimately, as a result of that, you're going to end up experiencing it yourself. So these are sort of the three tenets of learning. And so, is it that, like, whether it's Christians or Muslims, is it that they're nicer people, or is it that they're taught about giving and sort of it's reinforced that it's an important thing to do, especially if you want to be a part of this community. And so in the secular world, the question becomes, where does that happen? And so generally speaking, my answer to like why is it on the decline is trying to be simple about it. I say there's nowhere really to go to learn about giving. You don't like walk into, it's like, oh, okay, what's next? We just finished math class. What's up? Okay, yeah, we're going to go to giving class now, right? It's not like you have a place to go to learn about giving. And as a result of that, this sort of nature of generosity that all humans are born with doesn't necessarily get nurtured. And if that's the case, then what's going to happen? So like, think about like an athlete. Like if an athlete has a nature of athleticism, but they're not nurtured to like play sport and try a bunch of different sports. Like, when they're 20, how good are they going to be at sport? Notwithstanding their nature of athleticism. I mean, probably they're going to be pretty crap. And I think that's what's happening in the giving world.
Yeah, that's interesting. That you say that. And obviously talking about being better, being, a good person, bad person, better or worse, like those are things, typically words that people use to divide us, generally speaking anyway, by kind of what people believe. But really the point is kind of essentially, what are you doing with your time, right? Like, what are you doing, or how are you've been given a lot, even if you've earned it. Part of your success as an entrepreneur in my space, even in the charity space that you also enjoy, part of it, people have helped you out along the way. So the thought fundamentally that you should give back is important. So what is it that people get wrong about charitable giving? Like, for instance, well, actually, before I ask that question, I want to go back to one more thing about why people don't give, because this is interesting to me. Do you think it has to do with a decline in trust in where a person believes that their money is actually going, and will their money get there?
Yes and no, yes and no. I mean, if you participate in charitable giving regularly, do you think those people sort of lack trust? Um, the people in my experience who lack trust about like will my money get there are people who like are sitting on the sidelines or sitting in the stadium seats, kind of pretending to watch the game, and so yes, I do think that's a factor, and I think that's a factor for people who don't give. But when you start giving, like if you actually thought your money wasn't getting there, would you continue to give?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then people who are kind of serious about like anything in life, and giving is like a skill, it's an experience, just like everything else in life, cooking, sports, whatever. They'd probably start going like, well, I don't think my money's giving there when I give to this place. Like, why am I doing that? Because there's this place, there's this place, there's this place, there's all these other places, right? So when you buy a stock on the stock market, it doesn't always go up. So you're allowed to make mistakes giving too. It's not like every donation you make is going to be perfect, but that game is there. That reality is part of the game. So it's not like it's a perfect world. Not every restaurant you go to is like has amazing food or amazing service. That's true of the charity world also. But you're as the donor, you're responsible for that kind of stuff, and that's part of what makes it engaging and fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's do our best not to give to crappy charities.
Right. Yeah. How do you what is a crappy charity? Right? Like what does that mean?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, the how much time do we have? No, it's kind of like what's a so there's going to be some black and white answers there, right? And then
Mhm.
there's going to be a whole bunch of gray. So for
Right.
example, like what's a good restaurant?
Mhm.
So it depends on your so we could agree on a whole bunch of things, but if you like Chinese food and I don't like Chinese food, like no Chinese food restaurant's going to be good for me. Now, where that's analogous in the giving space is if like I want to support, kids who are, going to school hungry in the morning, and that's my passion, and you want me to support, I don't know, something in the health world. I might just kind of go, oh, those aren't good. Those aren't good charities. Like charity is in the eye of the beholder, and it like
Right.
like food, like art,
Mhm.
and that's the context in which, it's hard to say what's a good and a bad charity. It really is about who you are and what you're trying to get done.
Mhm.
Now, but that's actually more about the cause that you choose to focus on, like what cause, what region, stuff like that. And when you get into that world and you start deciding, literally which charity to give to, the same, the same. There's sort of the financial metrics, and then there's the effectiveness metrics as to like how well they deliver their programming.
Yeah, and no doubt, on a certain level, obviously, nonprofits are also businesses in a sense. They have to continue to generate donations, so they can keep themselves open. They have to budget annually, quarterly, monthly. They have to staff. They have to hold members of their charities accountable for whatever their roles are to the overriding mission of the institution for which they work. So how is it how is it possible that um or how is it essentially how can a person think about how often, so let's say that a person has very limited means to actually give, how should they rank order, um frankly, who they give money to? So let's say that I give $1,000 a year on the low end. I'm not a mega donor of any kind. um how does a person choose kind of how to bifurcate their money if they want to, or if they want more than that? How would you rank order that? What are your priorities?
Well, first of all, if everyone gave $1,000 away a year, there would be way more money given away than, I mean, as long as the rich people kept giving their big amounts, right?
Sure.
If all sort of people of average, income means gave away $1,000 a year, there would be a lot more money going. Um, I'll try to come back to your question specifically, but the other thing is, it's like it's actually about participation,
Mhm.
right? It's not always about the quantum. I mean, going back a little bit, we're talking about the Bible and religion before. Like you've got more than money to give away, right? You've got your time, you've got your talents, and you've got your treasure.
Right.
And then some people throw in the fourth T, which is like your ties, right? So you've got your network. So, there's a whole bunch of people who are, who use their talent and go like, look, I can give $1,000 away and maybe I will. But
Mhm.
when I partner that with my promotion abilities and like, my wicked barbecue skills, I can raise four more grand to make it,
Mhm.
for my buddies and have a good time and make that five.
Right.
So I think what's really important about that is that people sort of look at it holistically, and instead of saying like, how do I take my limited money and spread it around charities to make the biggest impact? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that question. I mean, if you're thinking that, that's better than not thinking anything. But it's
Mhm.
more like what are you really interested in and passionate about? Like what are the things you do with your time that like, you know, you're happy to do and enjoy doing and you feel like you get more out of than you necessarily put in.
Right.
And that's where giving thrives actually. And so, that then if you have that in your life, then I'd say like focus your money in there, in that space.
Yeah, it seems like if you're talking about a person that has no means but they want to give, it's often of their time. A person of some means, they give a little bit of their time, they give a little bit of money, and it seems like people of significant means often just give their means, right? And we just saw the letter that came out from Warren Buffett um, about how, in his testamentary instrument that he set forth for his children, and the world, generally speaking, put them on notice of how he planned to disperse his wealth and what they're getting, and he wanted them to. I forget exactly the sentence, but it was something like he wanted his kids to not have to worry about working, but not worry about, but not too comfortable where they didn't have to pursue something that actually generated money as well. At the same time, giving all his money away. Um, what's your thought on like y- large like these large scale organizations that he gives to, for instance, that then dedicate their money to giving? It seems like there's like multiple layers of giving. And this world is kind of misunderstood in that space. Like, for instance, I give to this big organization who finds other organizations to give to. It feels like it kind of dilutes my interest a bit because I'm putting them in charge of actually giving the money away. What are the benefits and drawbacks to that?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I think an analogy, if people understand, on the hypothesis that people understand, for example, the investing world a little bit better, e- everyone kind of comes at it their own way, right? So it's like some people want to choose their own stocks. Other people go like I know I want to be invested into like AI, artificial intelligence, but I don't know. I don't know anything about like who's best, who's going to win that race, et cetera, et cetera. So like I want to invest in this fund that these other people manage to take care of AI. And then other people would go, well, I don't know about AI, but I want to be in tech for sure. And then other people, you get my point. They say I want to be a bit
Yeah.
more diversified. And so in the giving world, those structures exist too. It's just not as common to people who aren't as fluent in in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's a bit of a systematic thing because so many of us only give when we're asked,
Mm.
right? So this whole sales and marketing mechanism that's called fundraising is a huge, huge, huge driver of giving. Less so in the religious space because those people are giving anyways, right?
Right.
But for so many of us, this like it's kind of like the one stock identifies you and it comes to you and says, "Hey, please invest in us." In the fundraising charity world, that's the majority of what happens. Whereas in the
Mm.
investment world, that's not the majority of what happens. So so but anyway, back to your question. There are funds kind of concepts, and then there's charities down here. And just by way of sharing, I think the fund to fund concepts is really important, and I think it's going to grow. So one of the things we're doing at Charitable Impact right now is we're recognizing a problem that lots of donors have, which is I know what I care about giving to. I know what the cause I care about changing and focusing my time and talent and money in is, but I don't know what charities to give to.
Mm-hmm.
Which is analogous to saying I know I want to like retire, but I don't know what stocks to buy.
Right.
And we're going out into community and saying, well, look, there's clearly people who do know what charities to give to in a causal area. There's all sorts of subject matter experts out there who know, what's up in their area. And so we're partnering with them. We call it cause funds. We're partnering with them and saying, like, you bring where exactly will the money go? And the donors will bring the money and put it into a pot, kind of like a mutual fund for a charitable cause. And then the pros will disperse it. And we think that's really important, because one of the earlier things you asked that we didn't get into was sort of like, whatever, why don't, people, give more, and what are some of the barriers for them? And I think a huge barrier is like not knowing that their donations will be used effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And if you sit back and think about that, like that's actually a really important point. And it's, how would you know? Like, how would you know that the stock is likely to go up? I mean, Warren Buffett dedicated his entire life. I mean, he was a baller at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he dedicated his entire life to figuring out what types of things to invest in, when, why. So if you're not dedicating enough time and developing enough talent in like sort of how to pick the best charities, you're not going to be good at it. Just like if you don't dedicate enough time to playing basketball, you're not going to be good at it either. So we think it's really important to find people who know their stuff, and then say to donors, like, look, trust these people because they know what's up.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, so we have a question that just came in. Thank you for the question, Johnny. He said, do you recommend donor advised funds, pros, cons? So maybe you can answer his question.
Yeah, Johnny, what's up?
Seems like you were kind of getting there almost. But what's your thoughts on this question?
Well, first of all, he's got a great name. And second of all, like, I didn't plant this one, but Charitable Impact is a donor advised fund. So my thoughts on donor advised funds is they're critically important, and they're for all donors, not just for rich people. The reason they're for all people is because a donor advised fund is analogous to a bank account. So imagine, moderating your financial life without a bank account. It'd be insane. And so why do people like not have a central repository for all their giving? One place to put their money, take the tax sheet right away. This is, I'm also describing right now how a donor advised fund works. Put your money in, get a tax sheet right away. The money can then sit there. It can be held there until you're ready to disperse it to any registered charity of your choice when you're ready. So I think it's absolutely necessary, a donor advised fund, that every donor who is interested enough in giving should have a donor advised fund. And the future of donor advised funds, which is happening in Canada thanks to Charitable Impact, and it's happening in the United States thanks to a few players too, is making it accessible to everybody who cares about giving. Like, like our minimum donation at Charitable Impact is $5. So if you got $5, you can start a donor advised fund.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's I think what you're saying is interesting. Like having one central repository for these funds, and then being able to kind of go from there, as opposed to like some kind of errant expense kind of coming up and then like it never actually happens. Like if you genuinely care about something that you want to donate to, removing those funds early on, if you're not great at setting it aside, or you don't have someone who's like a daily money manager in the kind of upper echelon of spending category, is important, because then every dollar matters, because it's actually going to go somewhere that has an impact. Are there any cons to donor advised funds in your opinion?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I think if you're a charity, they'll fundraisers in particular will say, oh, there's cons, but you're starting to get into the, like, first of all, I would say the weeds, and second of all, you're getting into the biases of people who just want to absolutely, without question, know the donor and develop a relationship with them and all that kind of stuff. And I'm pro that from a fundraising perspective, but from a donor's perspective, I don't think there's any cons to a donor advised fund, other than the cons that are associated with like the individual service provider of the donor advised fund, right? Like if the fees are too high, or if the service is garbage,
right?
Or for example, I mean, it's 2020, well, it's almost 2025, right? So if you don't have a web-based portal you can log into, so I generally don't think there's any cons to donor advised funds for donors, for people that give money away. Now, remember that, like, name me a tool that's built for the donor other than donor advised fund.
Yeah. I mean, it's a
Right?
good point, because otherwise it's you have to do everything on your own, right? And you have
The
to kind of
websites charities
navigate it.
have are not for donor. They're not for donors. They're for the charities.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's true.
You know, the only other answer I can give you is a private foundation, but, like, you know, you got to be a baller to have one of those.
I just want to seat at the table, John. Just a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Johnny liked your answer. He gave you the thumbs up.
Thanks, Johnny.
And this was not a plant if you're watching this live. Are there any statistics on exactly? Are there any statistics on automatic giving? When a person sets their their charitable donations on like an auto pay or automatic donation on a regular basis, that like are they more likely to like not disrupt it, not to stop it, to increase it, give way more over the period of like 12 months? Have you seen anything around what happens when donations are automated?
Yes to all of that. Right. Think about it. It's the stats are like analogous to the stats on saving, like people who automatically save off their paycheck. Do they, you know, generally speaking, save more? The answer is yes, because they set and forget. Right. So back to plug the donor advised fund, like set and forget into a donor advised fund is the best play if you're a donor, because you're in the game and you're like taking that $50 or $100 or $1,000 a month and it's going in there. It could be a quarter every quarter, like you set the time frame you want and it's happening. But also then you can start focusing all your energy that's put towards this giving world on what it is you actually want to create change for, right? So instead of, you know, so think about it this way. Every time you make a donation directly to a charity, you're actually making two decisions. The first decision, am I going to give money away? How, you know, kind of how much, right?
Right.
What asset class am I going to use? Is it going to be cash? Is it going to be public securities, right? Things like that. And then the second decision you're also making is, which charity am I going to give to? Which cause, which charity? And it's better if you separate those two things. Like, why? Because like whenever you reduce the scope of decision making, it's easier to get good at it, right? Because there's less going on. So, and that's just true in life. So like, gee, how much am I going to give away? Am I going to do it regularly? You know, off my credit card, decision one, boom, put it in there. Donor advised fund, right?
Right.
Actually goes out. It's all simplified. It's all centralized. And now it's like, I know I've got $100 piling up every month in my giving account. How am I going to use that to create the change that I want to see happen in the world?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because then if the only thing that has to happen is that the money is there and you just have to kind of deploy it the way you want, it definitely does motivate you to do it, as opposed to having to, like in the business world, it's like when you have to, the reason why house accounts for businesses where clients have to keep their card on file actually are beneficial is because you never have to ask your client for their credit card twice, right? And so if you think about, in my opinion, this kind of formulating this thought, building the plane as I'm flying it here, but like in my opinion, if you are a person who is like, okay, well, I want to donate, I haven't set aside the money, the pain of going to your pocket and coming out and having to contribute is it's just a second step in a barrier in your motivation to actually execute on that plan.
100%. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the set and forget. Well, look, I'm a big fan of the set. You know, ideally don't forget. Now, now for what it's worth, and look, I'm super pro charities and their programming. They're the ones that create the change in the world, right? Their programs. But, you know, they love people who set and forget, because like you give your monthly donation, it's happening, it's coming off. And then, what's going, you kind of forget about it. They love that. What I don't love about that is that what's happening with your engagement as a donor, right? For you truly to be sort of actionable, participatory in a positive way, in my opinion, like you need your wallet engaged, but you need your heart and your mind engaged also. So I don't like the set and forget from any. I like the way that line. I like the iteration of that. But otherwise, I like the set, get it in there again, just to plug the donor advice one, put it in there, and now instead of forgetting, kind of get critical about like, well, how am I going to use this money to like whatever create the most change, have the most fun in so doing. Um, I mean, so it's exactly like saving into a like a vacation fund, and then being like, gee, like, am I going to go somewhere hot? Am I going to somewhere cold? Am I going to somewhere chill? Am I going to go to a big city?
Right.
All that kind of stuff. And when you've got the money already set aside, those decisions get a lot more fun to focus on because it's like you've kind of already paid for them.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true, and that makes a lot of sense. Um, how do you at Charitable Impact? Is that something that you had thought about when you're building the company? That we don't just want your money, we want your spirit, for lack of a better word. We want your whole we want your integrity with your money as well. How do you align a person's cash with where it's going?
The boring word to use to answer that question is education. You know, the game in the donor advised fund world, there's two different games. There's the high net worth game that go focus on the rich people, and then there's like focus on the mass audience. um, the mass audience includes rich people. But the game in the mass audience is a behavioral economics game, in my
Mm,
opinion. It's because so you've got to like make giving cool. And
right.
part of making giving cool is making it cool to the person. Like, it's not just cool, right? It's cool to me. And the way, generally speaking, you do that, in my opinion, is you like get people to really focus on what they already do, and that's causal, that they care about. Like, you're reading books about environmental change or climate change or whatever, um, because you think it's cool. Like,
Right.
focus your giving there, and then that way your mind and your heart are already engaged. We have three beliefs at Charitable Impact. The first one is everyone has something in the world they care about changing, like
Hmm.
literally everyone, right? And then the second belief is everyone has something to give towards that, and the third
Right.
belief is when you give, you yourself get something in return.
Yeah.
So that first belief is, I think, is true of everyone. Like, everyone cares about something changing.
Hmm.
So my advice to people is just go through your list. Like, it's not that long. What is it?
Right.
And if the list is too long, then start knocking things off the list. Like, you can say you care about everything, but you can't act on everything. So what
Yeah.
are you going to choose to act on?
Hmm. Yeah, that was kind of like my question earlier about hierarchy and trying to figure out like where's my money going if I only have $1. Um, what's interesting to me is that I'm shocked, and maybe you have a good answer to this. Um, and maybe I'm not reading the environment right, but that there hasn't been more innovation in the charitable giving space around engaging with businesses to have their customers donate in the regular course of their doing business with them. So, yeah, there's times when you go to a major retailer who asks you to kind of round up or donate on the on the merchant processing screen, and you give $1.50, whatever the case is. But other aspects, right? There's how much giving is there in the construction industry, right? These people are making millions of dollars on projects. How much, like just industries out there where there's not a lot of innovation around, as your customer in the regular course of doing business with you, has the opportunity, an innovative like kind of integration between um, doing business with you and having a part of the money that you're spending, getting what it is that you're transacting with the business to go to a place that you actually care about. Do you see that changing? Am I wrong about that? If so, I want to be wrong. Let me know.
Well, I would love to tell you you're wrong. That would be fun for me. But you're not wrong. Um, why is there no innovation in that space? Let me tell you a couple things I think. First of all, there's going to be a lot more innovation in that space, and the reason why, if you jump forward, is in my bias, because of the donor advised fund, and here's why that's important. Because like in the U.S., there's over 1 million different charities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and everyone cares about something different, even though you can rally people together to care about the same thing for some period of time sometimes, right? But even people who care about the same thing, who live in town A, like kids going to school hungry in the morning, who are in town A versus living in town B, they both care about the same thing, but they're going to give to different charities generally, because people often like to give locally and have impact in their own community. So for example, one of the reasons why there's not a lot of participation and as a result, I think, innovation in that business customer world is because without a donor advised fund, you have to choose a charity.
Right.
And like, how are you going to get everyone to agree on that same charity?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you go to the till and like assume trust and all that kind of stuff, when you go to the till and it's like, you know, the, I don't know, cancer charity, but you're into Alzheimer's because, you know, grandma just got diagnosed or whatever, you know, you're kind of going, oh, like if I had the opportunity, I'd give it to Alzheimer's, but oh, not cancer right now because I've got Alzheimer's in my life right now. So the future of that would be, you know, the donor advised fund integrating and the corporation really just promoting the idea that you give. And maybe when you like add your $1.50, they add $1.50 up to some threshold. And then the person gets added to their donor advised fund. And then the person goes home and they send it to the Alzheimer's, you know, charity of their choice. So when you can enable donor choice or consumer choice of charity, I believe you will see a ton more innovation in the space. When you force everyone to kind of agree on the charity, too many people just don't participate. And part of it can be because I don't like that charity, and part of it can be like more cynical than that. Like, gee, is the corporation like going to actually send my money there? I mean, they do for what it's worth, and 99% of the cases. But the other part of it is like, you know, here's this corporation that I perceive to be making all this money. Like, why are they asking me for money? Right. And that's something that crosses people's minds too. So all these kind of factors kind of make it harder to say yes when it's a given charity. Whereas if it was going to your favorite charity, you know, you'd see participation increase a lot.
There's about to be the largest wealth transfer in the history of mankind. That's kind of maybe started to happen, but it's going to be ramping up over the next decade or so, 15 years, depending on how long, baby boomers live. But there hasn't been a period of time at all where there's going to be this much wealth that's transferring to another generation. What do we know about this wealth transfer and how it's impacting giving? Are you seeing trends from kind of early wealth transfers that have already happened? And is this something that Charitable Impact is eyeing? It's a big question.
We're not like eyeing it. Like, we're not like, hey, let's start Charitable Impact because there's a wealth transfer coming. We're starting Charitable Impact because there's nowhere for donors to go to get support themselves as donors. But I mean, yeah, sure, it's a huge factor. It's one of these things though that I feel is like talked about, and sometimes it's harder to see if you're not like really in the like finance and planning world. What we want people to know, regardless of, you know, the wealth transfer coming or not, you know, because there's always wealth transferring. That it's kind of big now is like, sure, and you know, 100 years from now there's going to be a bigger one, I'm sure. But so is that like giving is an option, right? So, and that there's lots of options in the giving world. I mean, there's not just lots of charities, but there's like oh, we're gonna give money away through our will or like before we die when we're old, but we're gonna give it to our kids for them to give away. Like, we're gonna kind of give them a big lump sum charitable allowance kind of concept, right? So there's choices people have. Like, they can choose their own charities and say, when I die, give it here. But they can also, here we are back at the donor advice fund. They can also say, yo, I want, my 3 kids to take this 100 grand, and, they each get $25,000 each, and then $25,000 that they, are going to give away together. Right.
Mhm.
So there's lots of cool stuff that you can do if you have the education to know what your options are.
And so, what is it that you want donors with charitable impact to know about your intentions to help them?
Well, I want them to know that that's our intention, is to help them.
Mhm.
And that's what's cool about a donor advised fund too. Like a charity bank, one of the things I like about my bank is they don't tell me where to spend my money. They
Right.
just help me. They help me spend my money. They
Mhm.
give me the tools and the support mechanisms if you call someone. Although usually the hold time is long. Is long. No, but to
True.
to actually to actually help you, run your life, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then same with other mechanisms in the financial world. Like realtors don't choose your house for you,
Mhm.
right? They go, hey, I know a lot about houses and I know a lot about this community. Hire me and I'll help you find the right place for you. So you can come in and say, hey, like I want to be close to a school, or I don't want to be close to a school. I want to have 3 bedrooms and 2
Right.
bathrooms or whatever, right? So what we want people to know about charitable impact, and what we want people to know about all donor advice funds that, in my view, run themselves in a good way, in a modern way, is that they're there to serve the donor,
Mhm.
regardless of what causes the donor cares about, regardless of what charities they ultimately choose to support, and ideally, regardless of how much money they give away. Like, my bank likes the rich people, I'm sure, more than me, because they give them more business and they make more money off them. But my bank also wants my kids who've got like no money at all to bank with them too.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, what we want people to know about charitable impact, but what we also want people to know about the donor advice fund is it's built for you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's an important thing in this kind of world of kind of bespoke innovations that have come up, and how we can how there's been so many curated experiences now, um, across the board in business, and of course now in charity. We're kind of talking about it as we speak. Um, that it's important for you know individuals to have this kind of radical transparency when it comes to their money, especially when life starts getting expensive, kind of where we are right now, with how much everything is costing. Um, how so I've always kind of wondered, like a lot of charities make up like talk about making a lasting difference a lot, um, even on your website you talk about making a lasting difference. um, like what does that mean exactly? What
Yeah.
does that mean to you? And what is like, because a person might think, well, I give $100 a year, a lasting difference. Like what is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, and I think that's a totally fair question for what it's worth, and I have some pushback around that lingo,
Awesome.
for what it's worth, and I think my team knows that,
Right.
and if they don't, they should ask, or listen to this podcast. But when you force me to answer the question, I think that there's a couple ways to look at that.
Mhm.
One is like the primary way I would think about it is like the lasting difference is on you, like
Mhm.
the donor. So when you participate as a donor, and it's something you do regularly, like you become that person, and that's a lasting thing. Now, an analogy would be like when you exercise. You're sure you can contribute more to your soccer team if you play and you're more fit, etc. But the lasting difference is on you. Like your health is higher. So I actually would say that the lasting difference is actually inside of you, the donor. You're healthier, you're happier, you find meaning in your life, you've got intention, you've got purpose, and that's the real lasting difference. On the impacting the causal side, which is where I think lasting difference is way harder to defend, to be honest. Because of the cynicism of you. I love your comment, even though it's sort of cynical. Like, how is my $100, lasting? Where that answer isn't just about you, you're probably not the only person giving to that charity, that cause that you're giving to, and as that money piles up, and as importantly, the various hearts and minds that are attached to the wallets that are giving the $100, align more and engage more with the fight for that cause, lasting difference can happen. Even in very difficult worlds, like, it's just that something happened at Charitable Impact yesterday with a bunch of people who were like practitioners in the addiction space, right? In the addiction space, it's like maybe you get someone off it, but then they relapse, and it's like, is that a lasting difference? So the lasting difference there is like, not individually you save everyone who's sick with cancer, but the lasting difference is that, like, there's continually momentum building in a lasting kind of way towards continually reforming, and creating change in society. Long-winded answer. My team's going to have to listen to this one for sure. I think the lasting difference is with you.
Yeah. And that's more of a reasonable, I would say, take on that phraseology, mainly because I don't, I mean, it seemed, I'm like, is this esoteric? Like, am I just not getting it because, I'm not in this world, or is it just, I think the most obvious answer is that is kind of the biblical answer, is that there is something that when you transfer something to someone who cannot give it back to you, then there's something physically that's added, tangible that's added to someone else, but there's a piece of you that's added back because of that transaction.
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. Just one other thing on lasting difference, and this obviously hits Charitable Impact too. People always try to sell charity on the impact side of the equation. Like, give because, like, the whole world's gonna, get better. And despite the fact I happen to think that, there's a whole bunch of giving that's gonna be ineffective naturally, just like there's a whole bunch of investing that goes into stocks that go down. So giving is a journey, and that's where, like, my brand feedback would be, focus it in on the donor, and if they're a person who gives and believe they're making a lasting difference, rad.
Yeah.
Right. But we can't sell for what it's worth. Donor advised funds can't sell lasting difference making on anyone other than the donor, because the donor advised fund doesn't carry out the actual charitable activity. Like, we're not making sandwiches at Charitable Impact to hand out to people who are food insecure, right? People are choosing food insecurity as a cause. They're finding a charity that does that. They're sending the money there, and then those people are probably making those people are making sandwiches.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I think that focusing on the donor is the right move. I mean, that's kind of theory. Like, I guess on the surface, it sounds kind of, contraindicated in some ways, because, I mean, if we're being honest, right? Because most people say, oh, the charity is for the focusing on the person who actually needs the charity. But by focusing on the donor, you're focusing on the resource, the source of what's going to be given to a person. And I think that that's probably a fair way to frame it, especially if you don't have the money yet, right? I mean, like, to get the money, it's like, okay, well, you could continue to, compound your interest at, 10% a year, which is great. But maybe if you took 1% of your cap gains and, you kind of use those towards a cause that was good, you might feel a little bit better about that 10% that you're earning, because it's really become 1,500%, right? Because, like, you're feeling better about it in XYZ. I think strategically it's the right move, because there's no real other way to get a person to mobilize funds. I guess kids can sell tires and natural disasters cause the humanity that comes out. But the problem is that ends when the camera shut off, and then there's no real fronting of expectations that these people still need the help. But if you continue to make it about the donor, then what you're doing is you're bringing them in to into the world that continually needs help, because they have something to offer. From a marketing perspective, it's the better way to present it.
Yeah, two thoughts on that. First of all, in the disaster example, I agree with what you're saying, but you know who does continue to care about the disasters? The people most affected by the disaster, right? So like
Exactly.
the
Yep.
mass world, the news cameras shut off, the mass world kind of forgets about it, does for sure. But like the people most affected still care, and there's lots of giving that goes on after that. Totally unrelated. But another point is, like, this is also why I think donor advised funds are so important, or making it more personal to me. The reason why we started Charitable Impact as a donor advised fund is because um, who's out there really working for the donor? And if no one's working for the donor, who's out there really developing the population to maintain giving as something that's super important to society, right? Like, who's promoting athleticism? Who's promoting, just getting access to different sports, and but like having physical education in schools, right? Like, my gym teacher, I don't think ever cared whether I played basketball or hockey or soccer or whatever, right? Just stay active. So in the charity world, you need the what Canadians call charitable organizations who are carrying out the activities, but you also need the the people who are coming in a cause neutral way and say, like, we're just here to develop donors,
Mhm.
regardless of where they choose to focus their time and resources. The time and money and their talents is totally up to them, but we're here to promote that, like, giving is a good thing, and by giving you're going to be like a happier person, and you're going to create change in the world. You're going to have a lasting difference made for you. um, and one of the problems I have with fundraising, notwithstanding the fact that fundraising is critical, because if there wasn't fundraising, the charity giving crisis would be much deeper than it is currently.
Right.
But so what's dope about fundraising is it raises money for charities.
Mhm.
But what's not dope about fundraising is it doesn't develop donors. So it gets you to give some money out of your pocket to a charity, but does it get you to be like, oh, I want to do this regularly and on my own without being asked?
Mhm.
And the data, as I read it, suggests very strongly that the answer to that question is no.
Mm.
So I believe the donor advised fund can develop and sustain the engagement of donors in the same way that the bank account can develop and engage the economics of the individual, because it enables that individual to personalize, to paint their own picture and to
Mm.
take responsibility for that, right? It gives them the agency to continually determine what they're going to do, when, and why, for what cause they care about, which can change through time.
Mm.
um and yeah, so I mean, these are all reasons why we started Charitable Impact.
What do you want your company to be known for when it's all said and done?
I'd like it to be known for developing donors, for contributing alongside others towards the reemergence of giving culture in the geography we're located in. I mean, right now we're just in Canada, for what it's worth, but like I want to contribute towards sort of replenishing the fish in the ocean, if the fish are donors, right? Like, fundraisers there to fish them out, and it's important to fish them out because people need to eat fish, but you have to replenish the ocean.
Mm.
That's what I'd like to be. That's what I'm most focused myself on, is creating an environment, a user experience that develops donors and sustains their engagement with giving
Mhm.
through their lifetime. And as a result of that, like, I don't really think very much about, like, who the donor is and literally how much money they have to give away. Like, it's not a targeted thing. It's like, come to Charitable Impact, sign up for your giving account, and if over time we see you using that a lot and lots of money going in there, just like your bank, you might get a phone call before someone else. But at the end of the day, we just want you to be an active participant in the economics of giving.
You're bringing people into the conversation. That makes sense, and you're actually mobilizing them. That's an important thing to do.
Mm.
It's activism in some ways, but more importantly, it's kind of moving people, and getting people who would otherwise not kind of be lost in the ether, and bringing them to the table. John Brumley, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. This you're right. When oftentimes it's hard to, when you think about charities and giving, all this other stuff, it's complex. If you have 1 million charities in the US and you have, I don't know how many in Canada, maybe 500,000, or more, maybe the same amount, maybe
86,000, 87,000.
87,000.
Yeah.
Then the complexity of trying to figure out how you want to mobilize whatever extra money that you have to give, or even not even if it's extra, maybe it's just a priority for you, is a inherently complex task. Definitely is good to see people like you kind of making it a little bit more simple and organizing it, because without that, it would be untenable in some respects, because it would be just too hard to figure out where we should go to kind of to put our money, right? And so I'm going to put the link to your charitableimpact.com, which is the website, and send people to that in the description of this podcast. But is there any final words that you have for the people watching about how they can contact you, if they kind of want to partner with you, if they want to try to drive more donors into your platform, or even just be a part of what you're building?
Well, if you're Canadian, look us up. Anyone, like charitableimpact.com. We're on the social medias, at We Are Charitable. Please look us up, give us a follow, send us your questions. Love to try to answer those. Conversations like this are rad. Just maybe one last comment, but based on what you just said, it is complex, navigating any space, but it's totally doable. I mean, all humans do it all the time, right? Like knowing what restaurant to go to. I mean, at the end of the day, you just go and you try it. Knowing what friends to have. Like, the more effort you put into really thinking about who you are and what type of people are good for you, the happier you are, because you're surrounding yourself with people who are good fits for you personally. So, and that's ultimately complex, right? But it's also super, super human.
Mm-hmm.
And we can all totally handle the complexity, and the complexity, is kind of the fun part. So, let's not forget that, like, we're generous beings,
Mm-hmm.
and giving makes us better and stronger people. So, if you're in Canada, come start an account with Charitable Impact. And if you're in the United States, go look up a local donor advised fund and check it out. Donor advised funds are built for you as a donor.
Will you be expanding to the US?
I hope so.
Excellent. Well, we hope so too. I mean, you're very close on the western side of the United States, so we would love to have you just come down south a couple hundred miles, right over the pond,
up over the border.
That's right.
Heck yeah.
Right. All right. So John Brumley, Charitable Impact. Check them out at charitableimpact.com. Follow them on social media if you're watching from Canada. We appreciate your time today and just kind of discussing the state of the charitable economy, and kind of how everyone can kind of get involved in the importance of donor advised funds. So we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, good hanging out with you, man. Really appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. And don't forget, folks, if you don't go about doing your business, you're going to be doing the business of someone else. Keep control, take control of what you want to do in life, like donate to the charities of your choice, and you will start to see things change and move the needle for yourself. He's John, I'm Micah, and we're out of here. See you later.